Bolivia is in the home stretch ahead of presidential elections on October 20th. Protests continue in Barcelona, Spain against the jail sentences of independence leaders. And Turkish forces escalate military attacks in northeast Syria. Hello and welcome to Telesur. I'm Doris Polo in Quito, and this is From the South. We begin in Bolivia, where President and candidate for re-election Evo Morales has said he has evidence of a coup being prepared in the event that he is re-elected on October 20th.
I have recordings of some of the so-called civic committees of Cochabamba and La Paz, along with some former military officers and members of the Santa Cruz Civic Committee. I have the recordings. They say they want to burn down the House of the People and intend to execute a coup if Evo wins. Once the election observers arrive from the Organization of American States, from Europe, we will be able to provide all the corresponding information to show how the right wing conspires against democracy, how the right wing conspires against the Bolivian people. That is why I'm explaining what happened in Potosí. It's the kind of paramilitarism seen in the previous era of the dictatorship.
Let's hear from our correspondent in La Paz, Freddy Morales, about these allegations and the upcoming election.
Electoral
campaigns are set to close on Wednesday, as Bolivia's opposition is trying to unite their 8 candidates in order to force a runoff vote. They're doing so by calling on candidates to support whoever ends up in second place, so that their chances against President Evo Morales improve. Still, opinion polls give President Morales an advantage of more than 10 points. If Sunday's vote follows this trend, then Morales will be re-elected in the first round, as the law states that for a candidate to win the presidency, they must get either 50% plus 1 of eligible votes or be 10 or more points ahead of whoever is in second place. With the possibility of Morales winning in the first round, the opposition has been holding rallies known as cabildos, where they have agreed not to recognize Morales' possible re-election and embrace civil disobedience. For his part, President Morales has denounced plans for a coup attempt, citing these cabildos as part of the evidence. He also told a local news channel that he has proof of this conspiracy by social leaders and former members of the military, who allegedly discussed inciting violence if Morales were to win. Morales finally warned he will present this proof to international observers. For its part, the National Electoral Court said that the electoral process is moving on without any problems.
Now, according to a number of international bodies, one of the biggest achievements of President Evo Morales' time in power in Bolivia has been economic stability. Let's find out how this came to be.
Bolivia's economic stability is linked to a single word: nationalization, a process that started in 2006 by taking back the hydrocarbon industry, which strengthened the state.
Between $67 and $74 billion would have stopped entering the Bolivian state coffers. Imagine what could have been done and with all that money for so long, and look what has been done over the past 12 years, ever since we nationalized the industry.
According to recent studies, a strong state economy has had great social impact, including the creation of 670,000 new jobs and the reduction of poverty from 38% to 15%.
We have spoken to Bolivians over the last few years about what they think of the economy, and many say they now see themselves as part of the middle class. 75% of our population believes they are part of the middle class, and less than 20% say they live in poverty.
Before nationalization, companies took 82% of oil revenues for themselves. Now it's the other way round, as the state gets that 82% and the companies get 18%. This has consolidated the central bank's reserves, and it is now able to finance large industrial projects.
If we look at the economic history of Bolivia, this whole process is new. Under the neoliberal model that ruled from 1985 until 2005, the central bank did not have a role in our economic development. More so, rules were written to exclude the central bank from this process. That's why the central bank was prohibited from financing the public sector.
International bodies have highlighted Bolivia's economic progress.
When you look at the long-term picture, Bolivia has maintained growth that stands well above the region's average. Bolivia has greatly reduced poverty in a short amount of time. That's not something that happens often around the world.
The economic stability is reflected in the rate for the US dollar, which has stayed around the same level for 8 years, and in inflation rates, which stand at 3% per year. As such, Bolivia's economic model has allowed the country to move forward and prosper.
Mexico's embassy in Quito has offered protection and shelter to 6 Ecuadorian citizens, including legislators. A statement by the Foreign Affairs Ministry named the individuals as National Assembly members Luis Fernando Molina, Soledad Buendia and her spouse, Carlos Viteri and his spouse, and trustee of the Pichincha Prefecture, Leonidas Anibal Moreno Ordóñez. The 6 joined leaders of the Citizens Revolution Party, Gabriela Rivadeneira, who took refuge at the embassy on Saturday following threats by the Ecuadorian government, which has cracked down on opposition politicians. Now, this crackdown started on the same day that the president finally repealed Decree 883. The government published an executive order signed by President Lenin Moreno indicating that the law would cease to be effective at midnight on Monday. As such, prices for regular fuel and diesel have gone back down in all service stations. Decree 883 sparked massive popular protests across Ecuador for nearly 2 weeks as it removed state subsidies for fuel and diesel. After almost 2 weeks of massive protests, the people of Ecuador achieved a huge victory against the government's neoliberal measures. Let's take a closer look at the events that led to this historic moment.
On the 10th day of demonstrations, the situation flared up as repression from Lenin Moreno's government sharply increased. This day was marked by the image of a young protester collapsing after being hit by a projectile. Indigenous and popular movements, firm in the request that Moreno repeal Decree 883, announced their willingness to hold talks. The government, on the other side, ordered an immediate curfew and the militarization of Quito, with only 30 minutes notice for citizens.
I've ordered the Joint Command of the Armed Forces to immediately start the necessary measures and operations. We will re-establish order across Ecuador, and I've also ordered the armed forces to enforce a curfew in the capital city, Quito.
Parts of Quito were covered by large clouds of smoke stemming from the large quantities of tear gas used by the police and by fires started by protesters to conceal their numbers from helicopters. On Sunday, a possible end to the crisis was on the horizon. After a long wait, all TV stations went live to a dialogue table between indigenous leaders and the president.
El buen gobierno.
Mr. President, it is clear that the right wing is controlling the country, along with the International Monetary Fund.
De no afectar a los más pobres de la patria.
We do not want to affect the poorest citizens. We want these resources to reach their pockets. We hope to invest the money from the subsidies into large projects, but also medium-sized and small projects to develop the fields.
11 days of social pressure on the streets, added to the firm position shown by indigenous and popular movements, forced the government of Lenin Moreno to step back.
We want the Ecuadorian state to answer to the needs of our various peoples and nationalities. We speak of a plurinational state. We are a part of the state, but we are not consulted about these issues. It hurt us when we are shamed for being indigenous people and campesinos, when we are ignored for being poor. It saddens me that you have to talk about poverty when the indigenous people are the ones who plow the fields and feed the city. We have come with one goal, Mr. President. We ask for the repeal of Decree 883 because we are being affected, we are being attacked.
I'm really worried that the decisions we took are being seen as if they were designed to hurt the poor, to hurt the most vulnerable. That is why I want to reiterate that we hope that together we can analyze and reach conclusions for a new decree that replaces the previous one.
The announcement of a new decree had immediate reactions. and celebration for the people's victory couldn't wait. Although there is still a long road ahead, the result reflects the power of the people against the wishes of neoliberal institutions like the IMF.
In other news, protesters have again blocked roads in Barcelona in protest at the jail sentences handed out to 9 Catalan independence leaders. A few hundred demonstrators gathered on Parallel Avenue in the center of the city, but the protest has not been on the scale of those on Monday, which paralyzed much of Catalonia and were met with heavy police repression. The protest began after the Supreme Court in Madrid gave out sentences totaling 100 years.
We call for an end to repression, for the release of the political prisoners, for the exiles to be free to return home, for amnesty that should mark an end point for all of those who have suffered reprisals. Dialogue, voting and freedom are always the path to resolving conflicts. Threats, prison and punishment resolve nothing.
A group of Catalan independence supporters also protested outside the European Union offices in Brussels. They included the former Catalan regional president Carles Puigdemont. He sought refuge in Belgium after the independence referendum in 2017 when a Spanish court ordered his arrest. This week, a Spanish judge reissued a request for his arrest and extradition.
But we need the whole support of the European democrats. Because that crisis concerns European democracy and the quality of European democracy. It's not a Catalan, a regional or a Spanish issue. That concerns all of us.
People also protested in Mexico against the Catalan sentences. A crowd gathered outside the Spanish embassy in Mexico City, carrying pictures of the 9 jailed independence leaders and the jail terms received by each of them. They said the court's decision made a mockery of Spain's claim to be a civilized democracy.
We need to let the other peoples of the world understand the repression that we are suffering from a country that thinks of itself as being the first world, but which violates human rights like any third world country.
From Barcelona, our correspondent Joan Ortiz has the latest on the Catalan protests.
The capital of Catalonia is somewhat calmer today. There are some protests in the city. At least one main street has been blocked, but it's not on the scale of Monday, when Barcelona was brought virtually to a halt. Nor have there been more protests at the airport. Across Catalonia, there have been some actions on highways and railways lines, but again, they don't compare with what happened at the airport on Monday. But the platform called Democratic Tsunami, which has shown its ability to use social media to bring out very large numbers of people, is saying there will be bigger protests later in the day. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. It was Democratic Tsunami which managed to paralyze the airport yesterday. 100 flights were cancelled, including 45 today. The police attacked the protesters over and over again. 115 people were injured in the airport, and there was also police violence in the city of Barcelona and in the other parts of Catalonia, which brought the total number injured to 131. One of those hurt in the airport suffered a serious injury and has apparently lost his eye. All this has been triggered, of course, by the very heavy jail sentences handed out to 9 of the pro-independence political prisoners. In all, the jail sentences add up to 100 years, 13 for Oriol Junquera, the former vice president of Catalonia, and 9 years for Jordi Sanchez and some of the others. And of course, the European arrest warrant was reactivated against the former Catalan regional president Carles Puigdemont, who has said he's happy to cooperate with the authorities in Belgium, where he's in exile, to resist the attempt to extradite him.
Coming up, Jamaica's ex-Prime Minister is being assessed at a local hospital following a vehicular crash. Don't go anywhere.
We are present at every event where our nations are staring. We believe in a new global vision, united in every broadcasting. We keep expanding our horizons and working on a closer and better communication. Now, in Grenada, Telesur, a news source from South America and the Caribbean.
Welcome back. Jamaica's former Prime Minister P.J. Patterson has been hospitalized following a road accident near his Upper St. Andrew home on Monday night. Patterson is undergoing a complete medical evaluation at the University Hospital of the West Indies, although the extent of his injuries, if any, have not been revealed. A release from his office said that around 7:45 p.m., the former Prime Minister got into a crash which required him to be taken to the Tony Thwaite wing of the University Hospital. According to the statement, Patterson was conscious, alert, and with family and friends.
So, corporate business.
Antigua and Barbuda's Prime Minister Gaston Brown says authorities have unearthed a scam to defraud the government between private companies looking to avoid paying taxes and customs officers. He warned that those individuals will be prosecuted.
We have discovered that there has been literally a rampant looting of government's taxes.
By whom?
By brokers and others. And we have seen where some of those goods would have literally gotten in with exemptions, facilitated by forgeries. We have the information, and those individuals will be pursued. In fact, what may have happened to the individuals who imported those goods would have colluded with maybe custom officers as well as brokers to get those goods in. So there are going to be consequences for those individuals.
The Prime Minister of Dominica, Roosevelt Skerrit, has announced that general elections will be held in the country within 100 days.
Listen up very carefully. Listen up very carefully. So I will say tonight, and I certainly could not have said this 2 weeks ago, that general elections in the Commonwealth of Dominica will be held within the next 100 days, ladies and gentlemen. So you can do your maths. Get your calendars out and check within 100 days for elections in Dominica.
Polls have opened in Mozambique in an election seen as a test for the recent peace deal between the ruling Frelimo party and the main opposition Renamo party. Frelimo is expected to maintain its grip on power, but Renamo is hoping to use electoral changes agreed in the peace pact to win control in central and northern provinces for the first time since the civil war ended in a truce in 1992. The presidential, parliamentary and provincial preliminary results are expected on Wednesday. Meanwhile, as President Felipe Nyusi casted his ballot, he advocated for a peaceful voting process.
One of the things that Mozambique has decided to follow is peace. Peace meaning no violence. And this will start to be part of the cultural Mozambique forever. I cast my vote and I want to appeal to citizens, to my comrades, to do so with the same serenity, the same consciousness, to go in their masses and vote. As we can see, let's continue to do so that we can show the world and the region that we are for democracy, tolerance, and this is our appeal. Let's believe and trust.
Tunisia's Electoral Commission has officially declared law professor Kais Saied as winner of Sunday's presidential runoff election. According to the Electoral Commission, Saied received 73% of the votes against the 27% taken by his opponent, media mogul Nabil Karoui. The commission said 55% of eligible voters took part in Sunday's polls, a significant increase on the 49% turnout recorded during the first round held in September.
The number of votes declared for each candidate is Kais bin El-Munsef bin Mohammed Said had 2,777,931 votes with a rate of 72.71%. Nabil bin Rashid Karoui 1,042,894 votes with a rate of 27.29%.
In Uganda, a mass vaccination has started for more than 18 million children against measles, polio and rubella. It follows recent measles and rubella outbreaks that spread to more than 60 districts in the country. According to the Health Ministry, the campaign provides an opportunity to intensify sensitization of communities on polio, measles and rubella, as well as disease surveillance. Health authorities in the Democratic Republic of Congo will roll out a new Ebola vaccine next month. Head of the National Anti-Ebola Task Force, Dr. Jean-Jacques Muyembe, said the new vaccine manufactured by Johnson & Johnson will first be rolled out in the North Kivu province and later expanded to the South Kivu and Ituri provinces. The DRC is struggling to contain the Ebola outbreak, which has so far claimed more than 2,000 lives since August last year. Shifting gears now, the corruption trial against former South African President Jacob Zuma has been postponed to early next year. This after Zuma's lawyer told the High Court he intends to appeal last week's judgment, refusing him a permanent stay of prosecution. Zuma is being charged on 12 counts of fraud, 4 counts of corruption, 1 count of racketeering and 1 of money laundering. The charges relate to allegations that he took bribes amounting to $270 billion when he was deputy president of the African National Congress from a $3.4 billion 1999 arms purchase by 5 European firms.
The state is really serious on getting this trial running as soon as practically possible, which is at the earliest possible date next year. And as I said, the court can accommodate us from April. The date obviously will be determined as we go forward.
The death toll due to Typhoon Hagibis has risen to 70. More on this and other stories after the break.
A review of the world news that investigates, incites analysis and induces criticism, because every event has a context.
Pusimos el punto en ahí.
Dot in the eye. Saturdays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. Turkish forces attacked the Syrian village of Umadisa al-Farat this Tuesday, sending several children to the hospital as a result of the shelling. According to reports, 2 civilians have died while 13 others were injured. Turkey has strengthened its military presence along the Syrian border as part of a cross-border operation against Kurdish militants. Ankara and its Syrian rebel allies launched a military offensive into Kurdish-held parts of the northeast on October 9th. Meanwhile, China has called on Turkey to stop its military action in northern Syria and return to the correct way of political resolution.
The sovereignty, independence, unification, and territorial integrity of Syria should be respected and upheld. We call on Turkey to stop military action and return to the correct way of political resolution. At the same time, the counter-terrorism situation in Syria is still severe. The relevant military action may result in terrorists fleeing out, and the Islamic State may attempt to take the opportunity to stage a comeback. We urge the Turkish side to take responsibility and be side by side with the international community and jointly fight terrorism.
And Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has defended his country's offensive in Syria, saying it was geared toward the elimination of terrorist groups. Speaking at the Turkic Council Summit in Baku, Erdogan also said he plans to send back Syrian refugees currently in Turkey to their home country.
Operation Peace Spring has 2 goals. The first is to completely eliminate terrorist groups and PKK bases in northern Syria. The second goal is to safely return to their homeland, to their country, all the Syrian Arabs who have been our guests for 8 years. If God is willing, in a short time, we will establish security on the territory from Majiv to our border with Iraq. At the first stage, we will ensure, with their consent, the return of 1 million and then 2 million Syrian refugees to their homes.
Rescue workers have continued the search for survivors after a devastating typhoon killed more than 70 people in Japan and caused widespread destruction. Typhoon Hagibis made landfall on Saturday night, unleashing fierce winds and unprecedented rain that triggered landslides and caused dozens of rivers to burst their banks. According to officials, more than 3,000 people have been rescued in the wake of the disaster, which affected 36 of the country's 47 districts. More rains are expected throughout several parts of the country already affected by the typhoon. Mobile phone networks have been restored in Indian-administered Kashmir after a 72-day blackout. However, internet is still unavailable on both cell phone and fixed-line networks. India cut access to mobile networks in Kashmir in early August as it sent thousands of troops to the region, citing security concerns as it scrapped the region's semi-autonomous status and imposed a lockdown. And with that, we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. For our viewers in Africa, remember you can find us on Starsat Channel 461 in South Africa and Channel 539 in Nigeria. And join us on social media. For Telesur English, I'm Doris Polo. Thank you for watching.